Я вас попрошу всех сесть.
Dear all, I call this meeting to order. Please take any vacant seats you see at this desk, or rather at this round table. Well, can we, Marina, can we start? Well, first of all, for all of us, it's some strange way through Trans-Caucasus route. It reached us that Natalia Melikhova from Yaroslavl region, it's her birthday today. There she is. And I want, on behalf of this class, well, the Caucasus knew about it and we don't. But we shall somehow try to compensate for our ignorance. So Natasha, I wish to congratulate you and congratulate you on having your birthday in this excellent place at this excellent time. Thank you very much. We continue this subject, and we should say that we are somewhat running ahead, and we have here today Mikhail Krasnov. I will say now a few words about him, but this subject that he will cover, independent court, in this context, as he thinks, will not be covered on purpose. So we apologize for changing the topic, or rather because what will be the right name we will give it? Q&A. Q&A. Whole subject, the whole topic, the whole session will be dedicated to Q&A, but will you say just a few preliminary words about constitutional life, let me put it this way. Okay, we have now clarified this subject. It will be constitution and our life, whether we follow the constitution. And in this case, we shall recall that all dissident movement in Soviet time, listen to what I have to say. Armenia at that time was part of the Soviet Union. It all started when Yesenin Volpin, one person, son of a big poet, Yesenin Volpin said, let's live in accordance with our constitution. And then jail, lunatic asylum, though he said very plain words, let's follow a constitution. Let's make our life comply with the constitution, sort of. One more thing I want to tell you. We have one of the best pundits in constitutional law, one of the best legal experts, a person who understands how the state is organized, and he was one of the most important influential experts when in the times of freedom, when this was in times of Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin, they did a very fundamental attempt. They took a very fundamental attempt to move away from one type of state under our constitution to somewhat different. To which extent we did it, this is a matter of tradition, culture, and our education. But we shall still continue to move along this path. And again, it seems to me that we shall listen to very many interesting questions. I attended expert meetings. They say that nowadays they are thinking whether we should need to amend our constitution, because now, let me tell you, because now our constitution is better than our life. Well, honestly, it's not the best time of my condition, I mean, as a spiritual condition and physical condition too, because I'm just we attended. We're now running through the special competition between the faculty in my university where I teach there, where I'm head of Department of Constitutional and Municipal Law. In this sense, we have here people from universities, not necessarily, but from universities. Well, I mean teachers. No, students mostly. Teachers, students, okay. I would say that finally the High School of Economics, or rather it was one of the first universities in Russia to use a true approach to the notion of concept of competition, or rather application. 30% people were walk-ins, but certainly we have this matter that, although it's never even pronounced out loud, that preference is given to those who already work at the school, but it's not at every department and chair, and it so happens that people coming, just walk-ins, seem to be replacing those who are now holding this position. But again, I sit on the board of personnel board, and there's university and academic council. My spiritual condition is poor because, well, constitution is better than our life. And this is, I will say a few words about it. It's for good reason that I told you. Let's put it as Q&A, and this is how we arranged with the organizers. That I will just say a few preliminary words, and then you will just, we will probably ask me questions, and I will probably comment on what you have to say, because I don't really want to deliver a lecture, although it used to be the case before. Again, I am not going through the best time in my life, because I'm just at a loss. I'm at a loss because it died long ago, but now I especially feel it, that our political life is dead. It died long ago. Political life, that is, goes along the watersheds. Are you for Putin or against Putin? It's not about political life. Anyways, this is the way we should understand it according to the Constitution and on its Article 13, which describes political and ideological diversity. I would like to move away from what Helena Mikhailovna put about Yesenin-Volpin. In the moral sense of the word, he was right. It is a well-known dissident's slogan. Observe your constitution. Mind, they say your constitution. But it's not about that. The thing is that there is a myth that is shared by many, if not all, overwhelming majority, including lawyers and specialists in constitutional law, who say that Stalin's constitution of 1936, was one of the most progressive and democratic constitutions, but given the system, it could not be observed and complied with. This is where I have to disappoint you, and maybe clarify some point with you, is that the thing is that, firstly, it was not a constitution in the proper sense of the word to begin with. Because to call an act, this is the fundamental act, a constitution, it's not really enough. It's not enough. The French, back in the late 18th century, put it nicely in their Declaration of Human Rights and the Rights of Man and Citizen, if I remember rightly, Article 16, that ran, the Constitution can be named a constitution when it guarantees, mind you, guarantees, not just fixes, rights and freedoms of man and citizen, and has division of powers. It's not really quoting, but I'm very close to the text. If it's not the case, then there is no constitution. It makes no sense. The constitution is like a cage for the government, nothing more. And when they speak, again, referring to the things that already were pronounced, that the constitution is better than life, what they mean is something that is inherently present in us from its Soviet understanding of the Constitution. Where I still remember the time, because I've been around for a long while, when I remember the Constitution Day is a national holiday on the 5th of December, Stalin's Constitution, and the 7th of October. That was Brezhnev's constitution. In those days, what was being told by the Soviet propaganda, the constitution enshrined such and such rights and freedoms for us. Why is it that I'm saying that? First of all, it's not a constitution, and secondly, it was not democratic at that. If you look it up, and you can easily look it up on the internet, both the Constitution of 1936 and 1977, the constitutions of the Union Republics repeated the Union Constitution almost word for word. You will find in a section where it discusses political rights, you would see that these rights are qualified in the interests of building socialism, in the interests of society, in the interests of communist, whatever, building of communism or whatever. And who would determine whether it serves the interests or it doesn't? It's clear that the criminal code certainly had at least 2 articles which would punish for the wrongful words. Article 70, anti-Soviet agitation and propaganda, and 141, if I must remember them correctly. As for social rights, again, we had an interesting story. It enshrined the right to work, but the Constitution again enshrined your duty to work. I don't suppose I have to prove to you that there is a logical, if I have a right, then it's not a duty, let alone we had an article for idleness and for soliciting and for begging. This more applied to the Constitution of 1936. There was no such thing as secular state, and says that the state is divided from the church and freedom of conscience. But if you look at more attentively at that, you would see that people could exercise their religious rights, whereas atheists were allowed in the same one and the same article. They were allowed to, how shall I put it, to promote the idea that God did not exist. So, you know, if you look at it casually, then, oh, look, we would say, how democratic is our constitution, let alone that in Stalin's, let alone in Brezhnev constitution, they ran saying that the Communist Party is the nucleus of the political system. In 1977, it ran that this is the guiding role and force in Soviet society. This is where we are driving at. If we have this sort of driving and guiding force in our society, and now it's focused not so much on a political party but in a personality, then you really are becoming an enemy of the state, because you act and you speak out of sort of at odds. Your speech is at odds. So much about the Constitution. Beware about the beauty of the Constitution. Today's Constitution is very beautiful, and the first 2 chapters, if you look at them, this is really an amazing, no quotation marks here. It's a breakthrough. It's a real breakthrough. And this is understandable because long ago they noted in research literature that constitutions are written so, like, as one Hungarian researcher put it, this is our fears are reflected in the new constitution, in the sense that whatever we wanted to move away from, things that we hated, this is something where we shall take away, delete from our constitution. And these leftovers of what we hated are very visible. There was something we could not even speak of in our constitution. Because in 1993, and I'd like to say that here I have next to me Stanislav, who remembers much better how the Constitution was drafted and how it became, in many ways, it was not really copied, but it is a brainchild of the non-adopted Constitution, which was born back in the late 1990s, the first draft, and then 1991, but was never adopted. Many things there of this sort of value-like character that man as the supreme value and division of powers and local self-government, and all these rights and freedoms, including right to legal protection and protection of the court. All this remains in our constitution, but the constitution, although it's not scientifically correct to do it this way, but I strongly recommend that you should do it, since you, as an active and as a minimum potential political figures, so that you should, at the very least, you alone should not be fooled, and you should not fool anybody, because devil sits not so much in these articles about rights and freedoms, which certainly should be enshrined in the Constitution, and it's not about these general provisions that certainly deserve the place, like secular, democratic, rule of law, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Devil sits in the chapters where we common people would just find them boring. How outside government works. Devil is in the system. How government works. This is where I probably stop. This is a problem where I really I'm defeated by it. But so that I should experience no cognitive dissonance, I try for myself, for my students too, to my students, I will try to tell them, look, I tell them that we would agree to call them people and institutions. You probably never think of it, but surely you may. Why is it that this is the way it works with us, that we have a certain personality whom we either hate with all our soul or we absolutely adore? This is where I'm very much alarmed by the outcome of the election in Egypt. There's only half of people voted, but see, half of these 97% of those voted for. Look, it's a great starting point for further disappointment. This is a very dangerous thing. Why is this the case? In social psychology, they even have a term, Tsar-centrism, that is ostensibly typical of Russian people. There's a whole bulk of tomes of literature. I can't go by it. It's just a whole bulk of institutional economists, sociologists, culturologists, social psychologists, philosophers, and historians of literature that are dedicated to this. Why is Russia going back to where it started? Where does the wheel come full circle? And one of the positions is that, one of the viewpoints on this is that we are like this. That's the way we are. So the one specialist in cultural studies, for example, Igor Yakovenko, don't mix him up with former secretary of the Association of Journalists. It just says that it's typical of Russians to Manichaeism is a clear division between two equal centers. This is the darkness, this is the evil, and this is the light. Probably you may have heard at least two films, although there is a whole line of films dedicated to, like, night vigil and day vigil. Mind you, there are two equally omnipotent forces that are at play and are fighting. This is pure Manichaeism. And what he says is that this is something typical of us, this dualism. Well, like this, and this is our picture of the world. We have enemies all around us, and here we are, people who are all in for light. I won't go deep into it, it's a whole theory. Osei Kirdin from Novosibirsk, he several years ago published a paper saying that Russia, there are two matrices in Russia, X and Y. I don't remember where he placed Russia, but it falls within the matrix of this patriarchal and archaic matrix, and there's no way for us to go. We can escape it, but gradually. But how can this gradual, incremental, this is my question as institutionalist, how can we creep out and crawl out of these archaic metrics? Or there is a theory of institutional and constitutional economists. Auzan, Alexander Auzan, a brilliant, he's now dean of the Department of Economy. Yes, when he arrives here, ask this question from him. I do not argue with him. This is idea of a track. Again and yet again, yes, the track is certainly there. There is this notion of previous history, certainly it influences us. But how do you get out of it? And this is my personal viewpoint, although it's very unpopular, because it's much simpler to say, well, this is the way we are, this is the way we are. It sometimes is a reason for be proud. Yes, this is what we are, and all of you who disagree, go to hell. But you may probably, but what extraordinary situations would require for our brain for something to change in our brain. So I fully profess this viewpoint that certainly mentality, traditions, the space even, the climate, okay, I would agree with this. All those are factors that certainly truly play a role and influence. But if you look at how the institutions work, you would see there is nothing surprising about that. In point of fact, it's almost one person. I somewhat know it from within. In point of fact, it's not one person. It's around him there is a certain benchmark, reference group that determines it all. Whatever is important for us, even existential sense of the word, some things. Some people may say, okay, what's so bad about it? Look at the Duma, let one person determine what happens. This is probably, would be nice, abstract sort of, if we approach it from an abstract perspective. But if we have it, then we shouldn't complain of arbitrariness, about rotting or decomposing of the most sacred institutions, I mean institutions of law. The same, first of all, there's same court. They are decomposing and disintegrating. And they're disintegrating, they continue to do so. I assure you, they will continue their disintegration because they will work, and they have been working, not following just by somebody's order, which is such primitive understanding. For example, somebody calls a judge and tells, look, return this verdict and acquit that person. Certainly it doesn't work this way. The workings are more sophisticated. Moreover, some judges, some catch the sort of atmosphere, catch the some perception, especially in cases on, say, violating voters' rights, for example, when you have to decide whether the election took place or not, are they to be perceived as valid or not, let alone what about police and law enforcement and so on and so forth. Well, so this is how the system works. You may say, yes, but why does it work this way? And this is certainly where history matters, but I won't take long about this story. But this is, okay, this is how it happened. That the conflict was certainly there. In many ways, it is based upon our constitution. My article is still in print and in the journal Constitutional and Municipal Law. The conflict was enshrined in the constitution. I'm not going to justify this picture. It's certainly tragic, but this picture of the 4th of October 1993, when in Borodin Bridge we have tanks who fire and shell the House of the then government. That was finale of the drama, but the drama started back in the 1990 or 1991 for sure. There's conflict that could not be resolved. So, and I want to stop at that. Do not neglect analysis, do not neglect to analyze what are the rules of the game. Our brain certainly matters, our picture of the world certainly, worldview certainly matters, and the way we treat one another like bullies that is perceptually seen, say, when you drive a car, that in general we, I don't know, to a great number of people, we don't really care what the other person thinks or feels. This is more like in our private life maybe, but in public life there's understanding that the whole system as a system, which is centrist, it's all set and rises from institutions. Well, I suppose I've exceeded my time limit probably, and now I will be willing to take your questions. If I don't know answer to your question, I will be quite honest and saying, sorry, I do not know it all for sure. Thank you very much for this introductory speech. Microphone, please. Timofey Grigoryuk from Yaroslavl. Well, as we know, jurisdiction, it's all about interpretation of the law. Constitution is the fundamental rule. The matter is about interpreting the Constitution. It's only the Constitutional Court that can interpret a Constitution. The Constitutional Court, you can ask many questions from it. There was a time when the Constitutional Court, at the dawn, it used to be an independent body, which was one of the probably players and actors in the politics.
And so Mr. Zorkin is the head. He's still there, but now the Constitutional Court is de facto is a kind of executive body, almost acts like one. In your view, is it possible to return to the Constitutional Court its independent role of the third power? And is it possible, is it doable without the reform from above? Because Mr. Pashna was saying that no judicial changes are possible without the reform from the top. And as applied to the Constitutional Court, what needs to happen? So the old head needs to, the chair should die, just a new one should replace him, or some drastic change, judicial change should occur before the Constitutional Court becomes again one of the sources of power, centers of power. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And in 1995, I was appointed aide to President Yeltsin. So it was not this official aide on legal issues, but I knew that I was supposed to advise him on legal issues. And in one of the interviews, I said that the judicial power is the most important. I remember the structured administration was completely different. So the first aide. So what are you talking about? So he kind of criticized me. So because the top power is Mr. Yeltsin here. It's not the judiciary. That I think that the most important power is the judicial power, the judiciary, because it's the judiciary that could educate or re-educate all other branches. And all other authorities, all other powers, certainly the Constitutional Court, first and foremost, because we had a problem once, we had a problem 2 times, 3 times, and then they would understand that this decree makes no sense to approve. So this decree makes no sense to propose because it will be judged as unconstitutional. So that's why if the judiciary becomes independent, then they will think twice before they develop and approve a questionable decrees of questionable nature. And then the Constitutional Court. So because in your questions there is some answer because the Constitutional Court was one of the subjects, political units, constituent components of the former power of Russia. And the Constitutional Court, someone wrote about it. So it was born prematurely. So the Constitutional Court was born in a very complicated, convoluted situation whereby there is Soviet constitution and it's patched and remodeled. And so it was born prematurely in a very difficult ambience environment. And so then starting from the divisioning of power and the power of the Soviets and everything just in one pot. So total confusion. The market economy was gaining ground and the old command economy was not yet destroyed, etc. And it was premature. But the Constitutional Court's competences, including many others, was the right to instigate, to initiate cases. Yes, and the Constitutional Court did that. So because they were given that right to the Constitutional Court. And they took advantage of this. That's why in 1993, after the coup, so the Yeltsin wanted to dispel it completely. I was just the aide to Baturin. And I wrote my opinion, so signed by Baturin, that that's better not to do it because I had different ideas. I thought that the court should not be touched like that, should not be, and a very confusing time. And what happened to the Constitutional Court in October 1993? When the court convened and Zorkin was there, it's a night meeting. There was so then the judges divided in their opinions, but it made no sense anyway because at that time, because they were talking about the arms. They were talking about the arms like the legality and so violence was in the air, and I watched the air between them, and so they were just who is stronger. And those things, I'm not a psychologist, but certainly they could not have failed to impact the judges' minds. But the president of the new constitution, the Constitution of 1993, he acquired a completely new place, role, importance within the entire system. So I call it the regime of personality, and but at the same time it was in the softer mode, in the softer regime, and because there were many opponents, so the governors opposed, and the Kremlin was kind of a little bit was afraid of the regional barons, and the Kremlin was afraid of the State Duma. It doesn't mean that there was political competition at that time, but there were some checks and balances. There were some constraining points. But nevertheless, the president was a different president than he was under the former Soviet constitution. He was a different personality now. And if you analyze the decisions, you're absolutely right in saying that the Constitutional Court could check and amend certain stupid things. So the most trite one is that the president can present the same candidate of the prime minister 3 times, and if the Duma does not agree, then he can dispel the Duma. What's the point? So why do they write them with the consent of the State Duma? If so the Duma refuses 3 times, they can dispel it. Makes no sense. And the deputies turned in 1996, I think it was back 1997. So in the 90s, so they asked, is that right? So the same candidate you are imposing, you don't want them. Why? The Constitutional Court said, yes, that's wrong, that's right. And there are many other decisions. So the right of the president, so to issue decrees that patch the gaps in the legislation. So then that's his right to issue decrees. And it's not so much about the chairman. So the chairman were loyal to Yeltsin. They were loyal to Yeltsin. And so now they're loyal to President Putin. But this general system, and that's the whole point, the system of personal relationship with the Constitutional Court, they're human beings. And so at the end of the day, the Constitutional Court understands that the Kremlin, in a wider sense of the word, has levers not very constitutional and not very legal, which can impact them. So starting from such simple things, everyday things like removing communications, transportation, personal cars, country houses, cottages, and whatever, just small things that could be allowed to be privatized otherwise, and maybe all the way up to more serious levels. So then for termination of someone's authority and powers, and they understand it very well. That's the reason. Whoever comes, the situation will be exactly the same, because the situation is the same. And then another thing. So make a point, because I did that analysis and I came to the conclusion that somewhere after 2001, 2002, you wouldn't find any request to the Constitutional Court where they would doubt any authority of the president, because the government against president would never go under the rules of the same constitution. Theoretically, they can. The deputies, State Duma, members of the Council of Federation, then regional meetings. So then there were lots of requests, appeals, applications to Yeltsin. So after the year of 2000, so there is not a single one. It was not a request, it was a complaint of the citizens. I think that you remember that to the Constitutional Court. Concerning the a cancellation of governor's elections. Not a single. No one got indignant. Not a single deputy got indignant. No one got it. Can you imagine? So there was that law, and so then opposition, for example, so opposition deputies. So they were not indignant. Only the citizens were indignant. So first they went to the Court of General Jurisdiction, and then they passed the buck, naturally. And at that time, so the citizens had the right just to appeal to the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court said everything is fine. So the Altai case, that was 2008, I think. And in 1996, there was another case. So then the legal position was the governor should be elected. And so they went against their own position, and now they say, okay, so they should be elected, but now they don't have to be elected. So they turned the tables, and they did an about face. I remember the arguments that the members of the Duma, the members of the president used. There was no word law, so there was only the word necessity. And no, they didn't speak about the law, rule of law, and the change of generations. It is not going to take place because you guys, because you need social elevators, because you came here, so certain political ambitions, economic ambitions, and this is good. This is great that you are ambitious, but when you replace someone, when you fill somebody's shoes, you will have to play by the rules of the game, or the system will kick you out, or you will need to become professional people in a position. So this is the drama of the situation, because you have to play by the rules. Because even if once you are inside the system, you will not be able to follow your own values. And that your values will be imposed, and to preach and to move forward to make your career. You won't be able to do that. No, because you either are inside the system or outside. You either shape in or ship out. St. Petersburg, Lashko, a little comment, and you were saying that the judiciary power is the most important. So there was this textbook, history book, and so there are only two branches of power in Russia. And only after many calls. So what about the judiciary? So legislative, executive, and judiciary. And so in the textbook there is only two. And even in the textbook, it's very telling. And so then the history of Russia is closer to federation. To what extent it's how far away Russia is from federation? And what does it take to bring Russia in conformity with the federation principle in the constitution? That's a good question, but it's good for the entire lecture. Okay, just refer the teacher to Article 10 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation. You'll see that the judiciary is there. So the one say that the president is above all branches of power. So why? So if there is division of power, why the hell should he be above? No, I don't understand that. And then the executive, the legislative, the judiciary, so federalism. Okay, let's talk about federalism. We never had, my opinion, we never had it, because for me, federalism, it's not just dividing country into a number of regions. In this sense, maybe Zhirinovsky was right in saying that federalism. So we need to unite everybody. So make regions and the general governor in each of the regions unite together. Forget about federalism. It's not important. And for me, what's federalism for me? That's what literature says. And Jefferson understood it, and this Hamilton, Madison. So they spoke about the same. That federalism is this kind of lowering the power, bringing the power closer to the people. Closer. What do I mean closer to the people? There's better proximity. So because it's close now, some people say no, because it doesn't depend on these people or not. The power does it depend on the people? I was driving, so the driver just Konakova region, so has the head of the local, so staked out a new ground for himself and put a boom. What does it mean? That he doesn't give a shit about what his electorate thinks, because he does not depend on them. He has every right to spit on them. Yeah, because he does not depend on them. I don't know how he's motivated. They won't vote for him or vote for him. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. That's why the federalism has never been there. And this is not the authorities to the regions, the power to empower the regions, decentralize. So it's nothing scary. This pendulum that goes from decentralization to centralization. So within the federal state is okay. It's nothing scary. What's scary is when the people don't care, but more cold than hot, because they cannot impact, influence, change anything. They cannot influence their deputies. They cannot influence their governors. They cannot do anything with them. So there's no. That's why the kind of federalism that exists, described in the Constitution, so it's always described, is not in the best possible way, but it's not there. Then what do we need to do? What does it take? A good question. I would be talking like a robot, a mechanic doll. I would keep repeating. So, changing the federal system of power first, and then having changed the federal system of power at the federal level, and the system will eventually start to differently build up relationship with the regions. Because who is setting examples? Setting a relationship to the people? Moscow. Moscow sets an example. If in Moscow it's possible to do, why can't I do that? Because I'm surrounded by cronies and friends. Psychological and institutionally too. So I had an article recently, and so we need to change the law about the about the general principles of organization of legislative executive authorities. That's a big, long name of the constituent units of the Russian Federation. What can be proposed? So even under the existing conditions, we can introduce the parliamentary system at the regional level. So introducing the parliamentary system at the federal level in all Russia. I'm afraid. So then there are some opinions to do that, but I think it's dangerous because this mentality has its implications, especially in such a big country as Russia is. As soon as in the regions, in the present day, in the present status of the regions, and the way they are now, once they feel that, but the Kremlin is not a boss. Yeah, so you have parliamentary, it's a coalition, agreements, but there's no boss. One strong Lang can hammer the table and send troops. No, there's no such boss. And then, so the country may start to disintegrate. And the ability of different parties to communicate, to agree, is very limited. And so like the stallions who stayed in the stable for 2 years, and they became feeble and they were growing fat. So the parliamentary system cannot be introduced at the federal level today. No, but at the regional level, under the auspices or under the guidance and protection of Moscow, the federal power, that would be very logical to introduce parliamentary system, and that would influence the federal power. So when the citizens, the people would understand that depending on their choice to the legislative council depends a lot within certain frame. The course, the main direction of Kursk Oblast, Karacháyevo-Cherkessk region. So on their decisions, on their workings, on their thoughts, much will depend. Once they realize that, because the parliamentary system better than others gives this connection between the choice of citizens and vis-a-vis the way of development. And so then it's coalition government and the constitution at the constituent units level that influence the political conscience of people because there were no laws. I call it this kind of bully attitude. Because people just out loud, they speak. So we are in the majority and we're going just to make this law. They don't understand the basics of parliamentarism because it's a quadrant. So to put together and to mold together different opinions, and it's a melting pot to melt together. Because a law is always a compromise. We need to learn the art of compromise. The parliamentary system teaches that, so it gives a lot of good points. And the system could be introduced at the regional level, in my view. Eduard Amirov, Sterlitamak, Bashkortostan. What's your attitude to the initiative of the Deputy of State Duma, Evgeny Fyodorov, and his group, his team, the preparation of the new draft of the Constitution to strengthen the sovereignty of Russia? You see, it's my fault too, actually. So my students, 2 years have gone by, so we've done our own project. It was kind of a teaching project, and when I gave it to our rector, to the dean, and so this is a study project. You should have written that it's a test, it's a study project. It's not a real project, and so I was not being tactful because they took it seriously. And so there are many drafts, many projects, but so the point is what kind of idea is behind it. It was the backbone of the project. If I don't know this initiative. I haven't been to the internet. I don't know. Just so when a new deputy comes out with a new initiative, usually the journalists call me and say, comment. And I said, no, I'm not going to comment on initiatives of different deputies because there are so many, and I can't comment on all of them. And then, but I am confused. It means that we don't have enough sovereignty. That's the first thing. If they want to deepen the sovereignty, and then the second point, maybe I will be in minority here among you, but we've been, running around with this sovereignty, as if anyone is trying just to take it away from us. So if just we're running around with this ball and don't want to pass it to anyone and just holding it so tight, so deal it to our heart, so it means that as if someone wants to take it away from us. And so the world is a boomerang. And sooner or later it will come back as a boomerang would do. And I don't know that for the sake of sovereignty, should we develop a new constitution? I think that everything is fine with sovereignty. And then President, by Article 80, he is the guarantor of the constitution, because it guarantees the integrity, blah, blah, and independence. It's all there. Of the country. I think it's good. It's all there. It's reflected in the Article 80. Article 80. And then I do not think that this initiative will be supported because this constitution at its basis is good. Everyone is happy with it. Everyone is happy with this constitution. It's a good constitution. And it's not accidental that we witnessed in some amendments, so then increasing the terms of power, so duration of power. So there was one amendment, and so let's extend the presidential terms in office, and then there was another amendment, so another norm, whereby the government reports to the State Duma annually, including on issues of interest to the State Duma. But this is empty, nothing. So there's an indicator. So the journalists, a good indicator. So when our president, our premier reported, so Putin was the premier. So when he reports to the Duma, it never evinces any stir like the presidential address, because I think it was stillborn, empty idea. So because a report is a report when you can take some drastic decision. So for example, so to impeach the government or just because if the president does not want just to retire its government, so no one can do that, and the Duma cannot do that. Yeah. And so then this voting of distrust, they voted first against, then the president can retire the government, right? May choose not to, but if they voted, they distrust the government for the second time, then the president either retires the government or dispels the Duma. That's it. That's kind of an issue. That's the reason why they said no one. So that's why we never had any instance when they voted against the government, and which would get up to the second phase of this vote, because they were afraid to. So the Constitution, so those chapters, they're there, and let them do. So they can play fast and loose with them. And it's not in the way of the authorities as well. And then certainly the unification, the merger between the High Court and the Commercial Court of the Russian Federation. That's the second thing. If something were in the way, then the amendments would be different. Or there would be another amendment that 16 persons of 16 persons appointed by the president would be in the Council of Federation. But it's a sinecure. It's an honor, like in Uzbekistan, so 16 people just who are appointed by president, and they're in the top chamber. This is upper chamber. Same thing. It's not important. Yeah, because the Constitution is not in the way of anyone. Everyone is happy with the Constitution, although so the influence of the current president is such that he could turn this constitution inside out. But he doesn't do that because the adoption of a new constitution is a massive headache. And even the radical changes and amendments, the headache as well. Unlike our many, not all, unlike the former Soviet republics, Union republics. I analyzed very interesting picture. So that's about the brains and the institutions and the mentality. It's a very interesting picture. Certainly there's no direct correlation, but there is some correlation. I can tell you in confidence that there is no personal regimes. So maybe there's little democracy there, for example. Maybe the country is poor, but there is no personality regime. That's true. No, in Armenia, in Georgia, Kyrgyzia, and in Ukraine, it's much more convoluted. But there's no personality, Russian personality cult. It's not there. And why? Because in little things, the devil is in the details. So the power is organized differently. In Armenia or in Kyrgyzia now, so the president institutionally, now I wouldn't say he's very strong. He is not, because he is tied. He's tied his hands are tied related to the elections to the parliament, and that limits his authority and power. That's a separate subject to discuss. Very interesting. And by the way, I moved over to another subject, but I want just to add them break. When you probably remember when Putin was at the end of his term before 2008, and there was some kind of a meeting of his adherents, his co-thinkers, and there was that meeting, some all Russian something, and that was 2008. And then there was a seamstress from Ivanova, and a weaver, and she was very sincere, open, and it was not a set-up job, put-up job. It was so natural, because the atmosphere impacts behavior, a person, certain nervous type. Think up something so that Putin could stay. Think up at least something so he could stay. That's what she said from the bottom of her heart. And you see that many Central Asian republics, we can observe that, and by the Russia as well. And so there are restrictions and constraints as well. But Nazarbayev has been in power for 24 years, Karimov is 24 years in power. Why Rahmon is there since 1992, 1991, something like that, long time. Lukashenko is so the new presidential model appeared a bit later, but this is almost 20 years in power. Why? Why is that? So there's the issue about it's all about democracy. Everything is so democratic, and it's not as soon as the term is up and it's coming up. So then they put it up for a referendum, very democratic, and so they put and people go on, no problem, go back to your office, and so that's an issue and a question for me. And so here in our brains, in our mentality, whatever, just what's wrong? It doesn't click, or we're afraid that someone else may come in who will be worse than the previous guy, or we're afraid of turmoil, public hostilities, many questions. I don't know what we're afraid of, and we need certainly to develop these ideas, because even Russia, in my view, so looks a bit better than our former neighbors.
So I don't think that constitution is to be amended, only if something radical happens. Let's move on. Your question, please. Thank you. I'm Natalia Sergeyeva from Samara. Well, my question is related to your latest statement. You were talking about Tsar-centrism and protectionism. So I think that the Tsar-centrism, Tsar-centric mentality is quite deeply rooted. So I can think of three options for the development. The system of state organization can be changed. Well, a president can be a scapegoat, like in Germany, while democratic institutions are preserved. Or Tsar-centric attitudes can be addressed through the retention of democratic institutions, or democratic institutions can be removed, and some non-democratic movements in the political scene will prevail. So, and do you ask me what I like most? I don't like all three of those options. The president of Germany, well, you understand that Germany is a parliamentary republic, and we don't even know his name. I don't remember his name. I just remember that he or she came to St. Petersburg and brought an organ to the president of Russia. Similar situation is in Italy. King Juan Carlos in Spain plays the same symbolic role, and unfortunately Spaniards are in favor of the Republic now. It's one of the options, but to my regret, I'm afraid that our brains, although we are Tsar-centric, but they are anti-monarchy. It's a surprising combination. At least social polls show us that our people are in favor of Tsar, but they are not in favor of constitutional monarchy. So I don't think that it's possible or it's feasible when legal dynasty was terminated and in the house of the Romanovs. To the best of my knowledge, there are various factions, and there is no unity in any nominee for that position. And the third option you mentioned, you say that probably we keep on developing like that, no democracy. Somebody else would think for you and just enjoy your life. And once I saw a postcard, Joseph Stalin stays in his office in the Kremlin at night, and the note reads, our leader is thinking of us. It's kind of the external locus control. Our intention is not to pay attention to ourselves, but to find somebody who is to blame, so that in case there is a scapegoat to blame of. But most of the people cannot see the cause and effect links. I didn't quite understand your second point. Please specify. Tsar-centric attitudes are evolving. So if those schools like that will be everywhere, like we had in the Soviet times, the Marxist-Leninist schools, but I don't believe in that universal enlightenment. I can really see some ways when practice prevails. So somebody files a case in court, and court decides in favor of a person who lost illegally some land plot. If people see that the court, judiciary is in their favor, they will go to court. But judges are dependent, and so they would not change their attitudes. I don't know if Mr. Pashin told you about that, but I can tell you that the judiciary cannot be independent here, not even because of the environment, but because contrary to the Constitution. I wrote an article about that, and I keep on my count no matter what president is, Yeltsin, Medvedev, or Putin, what authority were delegated by the legislator that go beyond the framework of the constitution. There are some authorities that cannot be fit into the presidential functions. For instance, appointment or removal of the rectors of the universities. President is the guarantor of the constitution, but doesn't mean he can appoint or remove rectors of universities. Why can he do that? Because the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, or why? And the accountant chamber, the law reads that president can approve candidates, but that's the area of the legislature control. And so you can see a lot of functions of the president that go beyond the constitutional framework. And I don't believe that, and there are no foundations for the mentality to change. What I can offer is a different model. Probably the my model is also vulnerable, but still, thinking of president, in my view, is to be the safeguard, and I'm against the term of the head of the state. He is to be the safeguard of the statehood, who I agree that that person is to be delegated and is to be authorized a very strong power. So that person is supposed to have power at his disposal. He's to be a head of the police, secret services, but that person should not interfere with the current politics. And perhaps president can sign some decrees like it's done in parliamentary countries, but the government is to be formed by the parliament. And if it happens, then the president will really turn into the guarantor of the constitution. There is kind of schizophrenia, like we see in France. But in France, 200 years have passed since the Great French Revolution, and the Great French Revolution, in my opinion, lasted for about 100 years, till the Third Republic, when another constitution was passed in 1985. But there was quite a succession of emperors, kings, and presidents, and so it was the French constitution, new constitution, and brewing during that time. And now French people cannot allow any president, any popular figure be so imposed on them. General Charles de Gaulle was most popular, but he had to leave anyway. And he said that if you didn't vote for the municipal reform, I would leave, and he would, and he did. So there is kind of schizophrenia, but in our case, it turned into the situation when even a referee on the football pitch plays for one of the teams. And to say it mildly, the president does not like opposition, but that's normal. That's normal human reaction. And even the Constitution invites the president to do so, no matter how strange it may be. President is the guarantor of the Constitution. He is the keeper of the rules of the game. He is guarantor of freedoms and rights. But simultaneously, it's the president who determines main areas for both internal and external policies. And it's something that normally parties do. The president cannot determine an abstract policy. He will always determine some specific area of the policy. And any president would say that, don't interfere with me, I'm leading my people to the happiness. And people tells the electorate that those are the people who stay in the way, my way, to lead you to total happiness. And it's the Constitution that invites him to do so. And it was not invented by me. At the end of 1980s, one political analyst, Juan Links, he was of Spanish origin, said that the president just goes nuts, that people all vote for that person at the elections, because if so, president thinks that the president is kind of a messiah, and he perceives opposition as some hints and tricks of the opposition, of his enemies. I invite you to read the books of that political analyst. You can find them in, it's called Dangers of Presidentialism. So it can really be done in technical terms and constitutional terms, so that president would be only the guarantor but not the player in the field. And in this presidential model, which Russia belongs to, in some countries they have that instrument, in Slovenia, in Bulgaria, in Macedonia, in Poland, and it's efficient to such an extent that some Polish researchers believe that they live in a parliamentary republic. Okay, thank you. Next, please. Your question, please. Good evening, I'm Alexei Kiryanov from Rostov-upon-Don. Alexei Mikhailovich, what do you think of the time when Constitution was passed? That was in the days of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Hypothetically, could then or now any amendment be done which are similar to the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution regarding the possession of arms, right to possess arms? Could it be done in the early 1990s, and can it be done now? Well, we work in a different way. Why do you think American Constitution stays for about 200 years? They don't touch, they don't amend the body of the Constitution. They have 27 amendments and several articles which are divided into sections. So if amendment is introduced and passed, it doesn't change the Constitution. And it's not easy, of course, and Senate and Congress should vote for that. But in our case, it's different. I'm not saying if that right is needed or not, but speaking of the approach to make those amendments, extension of the term and other amendments were easier to pass, but now it's not that easy, because it falls under the second chapter, and for that end a constitutional convention is to be called, and nobody knows what can happen if that constitutional convention is held. Perhaps instead of the right to possess arms, they may pass a lot of things that we should not let that happen. So even technically, it's not that easy. And we still do not have any law on the Constitutional Convention, and many people believe it's good, because if it were in place, it could always provide an opportunity to call for such a convention. And it's good we don't have that, and just for the sake of that possession of arms, you should not do that. And so if society and the power wanted very strongly that people should be allowed to possess arms, it could be amended. The law on arms could be amended. And in the United States, it's part of the Constitution. In our case, it could be a sub-law. It may not be in the Constitution, because we really need something that works and not just words. You please, at the last row. I'm Andrei Grishin from Mineralnye Vody. In the light of the recent events when two courts, the High Arbitrage and Supreme Court, merged, who do you think out of the inner circle of Putin impacted him in terms of judiciary? Good question. I don't know the answer. I'm so far away, and which is good, from the presidential administration. And I was even honored not to be invited to attend the meeting of the chairs of law departments, law schools, to meet with the president, because a professor from my department was invited. And I don't know the machinery of the presidential administration and inner circle with Mr. Putin. I just don't know. You, please, near the window. I'm Nikita Malchikov from Moscow. Thank you very much, Mikhail Alexandrovich. As always, it was very emotional. Have we met before? Yes, many times, and I read your articles, and I was always struck with a number of references to various works, various authors, and I would like to take a couple of minutes just to share my remarks regarding your presentation. Very recently, I think a month ago, there was a book by Mr. Shainis, Authorities and the Law. And sorry, it's called The Power and the Law. And while reading the book, very interesting observations came to me. It's about the constitution that is in place, the hypothetical constitution. I can refer to Max Weber, who spoke of the country of various strata, and Russia is one example of that. We have a lot. And you can really think of that as neo-feudalism. Mr. Pivovarov shared his ideas of that, and Ministry of Justice, what functions does it perform? Nobody knows. There is a second point. I would say that the country is ruled by will. And there was the lawyer Krasnov before the revolution who studied that particular aspect, when the power should limit their authority by law. And probably we should really follow that suit. But how to find that law? It's a question, and in early 1990s, when there was a constitutional convention, and further on, President Yeltsin said if we passed the constitution, it would be an interim constitution. We would concentrate authority with the president. It would be the decree law. Some 20 years have passed, and now in the charter of president of the Constitutional Court, Zorkin, which read that we would not go into amend the constitution. But for the years I went to the university, the constitution was really undone. Terms were changed, even the judiciary composition was changed. Senators are added to that branch. And in the Higher School of Economic, they think that it's not the source of law, but that's a monument to law. Because 90% of its standards and articles do not work, and they are not applicable. And reading your works, same thoughts came to me. That's why I wanted to make that comment. But thank you very much again for your considerations. Dear colleagues, we have 10 minutes to go. Please, another question. I think it will be maybe the last question. I'm Artur Rudakov from Rostov-upon-Don. Mikhail Alexandrovich, in your early remarks, you complained that we had got into that matrix, but we cannot find a way out of it. Perhaps we should understand how we got into it. In 1993, there were some voices that the drafted constitution leads us to the authoritarianism and bureaucracy. Could you recall what you thought about that constitution at that time? Was it just euphoria that the constitution lacked Article 6? Or I can recall a story by writer Shukshin and one of his stories. And you really killed me with that question, but I'll try to respond anyway and be honest with you. It's a very straightforward question, really. And probably recalling those events, I'm ashamed of that. But we got into that matrix not in 1993 and not even in 1991. It was the case even during the rule of Tsar Ivan III. But I got the main idea of your question. You are criticizing the authorities now, but at that time you worked for Yeltsin. What did you do at that time? And I'll try to respond to that. I can tell you that I'm a religious person. I do confessions on a regular basis. I cannot deceive others because I understand that the Lord sees everything. And I should admit honestly that it took place, and partially your observation is correct, because at that time I was preoccupied with another picture of the world. There is one side I belong to, and there is the other side which is hostile to me. I'm not saying that I thought along correct lines, but I'll try to explain the way I thought. So for me, that constitution, actually the constitution was adopted, was passed after I had already defended my doctor's dissertation, and Mr. Baturin invited me to the Kremlin. And just on the eve of St. Mary's, the Innocent feast, that decree was passed. And I understand that it's not a justification, but the main thing to say that at that time, really, I just had a two-sided, two-color thinking. There are the supporters of reforms, and there are the opponents, the oppositions. Yeltsin was for reforms, so I was supposed to render any support I could to him. And then I was actually drowned in the routine things, and actually I admit that that was my blame at that time, and really I'm very sad about that. That I did something wrong or didn't anything at all, and probably you don't have to invite academicians to the administration, but it's important to learn from one's bitter lessons. And in March 1998, it was in March 1998 when my eyes were open. I really knew then there were rumors that the constitution was bad and interim, but Mr. Yeltsin really did care about that, not about the constitution, but really he treated that as a sign, a symbol of his victory. And It's not very much a stability, but probably the symbol of his victory. And but what happened in March of 1998? And very bad thing, strange and very painful thing happened to me. And perhaps you know what I mean. And Yeltsin sacked Chernomyrdin. I don't know the current technology, but at that time, the signature of the legal aid to the president was the last on the draft decree before the president signs that. And sometimes those decrees were signed personally by Yeltsin in his office without any signatures of aides or ministers. Sometimes I wrote a memo to the president that the draft decree is bad and you should not better write that. So you can understand that if the decree is not initialed by all the respective persons, it may not be valid. And the decree on resignation of Chernomyrdin I received only after it was signed by Yeltsin. And very unconstitutional things were written there. It read that Chernomyrdin will be resigned. Chernomyrdin is resigning, and I, as a president, will assume the responsibilities of prime minister. It could be done at that time because the president was the head of the executive branch. I received that document, and I just pick up the telephone and ask the head of the legal service, how is it possible you really let that draft come to the president? And he said to me that he had not seen that draft too. And I wrote a memo that something is to be changed, and Kiriyenko was appointed vice prime minister, and you could find those stories in Consultant Plus and in other publications. I think it was issued on March 23, 1998. And right after that, I first made a statement to the media, and then I officially announced about my resignation. Because I realized at the time that something depended on me had gone, and I could only guess where those decisions were taken in the so-called family, and I was required only as a decoration, and I didn't like that. After that, I began reading some publications that even at that point people were telling same things I'm telling you now. And I'm ashamed that it happened to me too late. But thanks God it did happen. And it's good that I started doing my job now, and not from the year 2000, but from 1998. And colleague, my friend Stanislav Danskih, I think, is so much impressed. I mean, sincerity. Then Stanislav said that perhaps we should close at some more optimistic note, and should we continue discussions. But I think we closed on a very optimistic note, because the constitutional history and the law history of the country was very complex. And it came to me that Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin's fate was not that somebody could envy him. as the line of disappointments. A great number of people, sooner or later, there were some people who didn't survive that process, and our next expert who will meet with us after dinner is one example. I think Mikhail Krasnov fits his session into our program quite well. We started talking about law issues right after lunch, and that law aspects are being translated into political dimension, and will continue and do so after dinner. And Mikhail Alexandrovich is our annual guest here at the school, and it's always very in-depth and, which is most important, sincere analysis, and I would like to thank you, our expert. Have a nice dinner, and we will reconvene in 1 hour.